In this video, we'll be going over how to draw a cube and shade a cube. If you remember from some previous lessons, we've looked at cubes in a lot of different ways. We did a 1-point perspective cube, just to kind of refresh your memory on that. Let me just get a sheet of paper for you. Oops. So, we looked at cubes a couple different ways. In our block and bubble letter unit, we looked at a cube with, if you started with a basic shape and just did a diagonal line on each of the corners, and then copy that same line, that creates a cube, right? We also looked at a vanishing point, where if you make a box anywhere on the page, or a square anywhere on the page, you connect each of those corners to that vanishing point, and then again, just sort of finish off the lines here to create your cube. I'm going to show you one more way that I learned that was a pretty simple, fun way to draw a cube. And that is called the parallel line method. So it's 3 sets of 3 parallel lines. All right? Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, it's pretty simple. Basically, I'm going to start with 3 of the same length lines, right? So I'm going to start with one over here, one over here, and then one in the middle, a little bit lower, slightly lower. So you could use a ruler to measure it out. You don't necessarily have to. So these 3 lines are parallel to each other, right? So if I were to hold my pencil here, here, and here, they're relatively parallel. Now, that's one set. The second set of parallel lines are going to be connecting these two. One. So notice how to connect it that way. My next line has to be parallel to this line here. And the third one is going to be up here. Right? So they should all be the same length as well. And that is your second set. So here's my first set again. 1, 2, 3. Here's my second set. 1, 2, 3. And I'm sure you can figure out where I'm going for my third set. So I'm going to connect these two here, right? Using that same method, you want your 3 additional lines to be here. Now you may be saying to yourself, well, what happens if I mess this up? Let me just show you. So let's say you started off good, and then you started doing your parallel lines differently. Like let's say I put this one this way. I can't connect this one, right? Because it's not going to connect if I'm parallel here. So if I connect it here and here, you'll see that this looks off, right? It's almost pointy, like a roof of a house or something. Similarly, if your lines aren't the same length, so if I do this one, I do this one longer, and this one, so these two are the same, but this one's a little bit longer, it's still not going to work, because I have this, of this, of this, right? So these two are parallel, but this one's not, right? So you just want to think about those sorts of things. So you want to do 3 sets of the same length line, evenly spaced out, right? So this is no, this is no. Just to show what it looks like again correctly. So you have 2, same length. Third, a little bit lower, same length. That's 1 set of parallel lines. 1, 2, 3. That's my second set, and 1, 2, 3. All right, let's get back to work here. Okay, so let's say my light source is coming slightly differently. Well, actually, we'll have it come in the same way. So here's my light source. Now, what's different about a cube from the other forms that we looked at was that it's the only object that we looked at that has flat sides on all sides, right? The sphere is perfectly round. The cylinder was round for the base of it, even though the top was flat. The cone was triangular but round. It was flat on the bottom, but we didn't even see that, right? This one is a 6-sided flat figure. So when light hits it, it's not necessarily going to go from dark to light. Each section is going to be a different value completely. So, what do I mean by that? For my top, I'm going to do the top of this thing, the whole thing like a 2, right? So I'm going to do an evenly spaced out shadow or value. The same light is hitting the side, but not quite as strong as the top. So I'm going to make the side here a 4. I'm pressing a little bit harder. I'm going back and forth both ways here. Shading it in, shooting my finger this time. And this left side isn't getting any light because the light's coming this way. So this left side is going to be fully dark. So I'm going to press the hardest here, like between a 6 and a 7. I may have to go over it again too, but just a good start. So there's the basic shading on a cube. Now, for the cast shadow, I want you to look at this bottom line here. You're going to extend this bottom line outward, right? Because it's the opposite of the light source. So my light's coming this way, and it's coming out that side. So I'm going to have a line coming out here, and I want another parallel line to this line coming out over here. All right, so notice how it's straight. Now, when you shade the cast shadow, this is going to be similar to the other cast shadows. It is going to be darkest where it meets the object, and it's going to fade to light the further away it gets. Alright, so I'm going to blend in tones so it goes from about a 7 to a 6 and a 5 and so on and so forth. Okay, so just to be consistent with the other videos, my halftone is really this whole entire section, right? So here's my halftone. Right? There really isn't necessarily a core shadow, but this whole section here, I guess, is your darkest point, so that will be the core shadow. Here's my cast shadow. Core shadow is this whole section here. And you might be thinking about the reflected light, right? So this same light is coming across my object, bouncing off and hitting back over here. So the bottom of this, I'm gonna use this eraser. Give it a little bit lighter. All right. There you have it. A basic cube using blending and shading to create three-dimensionality and depth. I'm going to show you guys the 4 other ways of shading it right now. So again, 3 sets of 3 parallel lines. All right, so let's begin. Now hatching is interesting. So there's only one directional line. In order to create the illusion of depth or illusion of different values or tones, it's all about the space between your lines, right? So if I have a very little space between my lines here, it's going to be darker than, let's say, this one, which I'll space out a little bit more, right? And then maybe the top, I'll have them really spaced out. So my top here, I'm gonna go, right? So I went from maybe 30 lines to, you know, 6 or 7 lines to barely 4 lines. And from a distance, it'll give somewhat an illusion of depth. Okay, you can do a little bit more with the cross hatching. So again, I'll start the same way, but I can come back in a different direction, multiple different directions, up, down, diagonal. Right, I'll do the same thing here. But again, just maybe not as many directions this time. And the top as well. So, having the option to give multiple lines gives a little bit more depth. Oh, I forgot about the shadow. So, the shadow, just like before, I'm just going to spread my lines out farther, the farther away I get from the object. So for cross hatching, I'll start the same way. But with cross hatching, I can also come this way. Okay, next, stippling. With stippling, I want to make sure, or try my best to, have an evenly spaced out number of points or marks. This one will be a little bit less. And the cast shadow will be done the same as the other ones. So darkest where it meets the object. So the highest concentration of dots are here. All right, and the last one, scumble. All right, so first let me outline my cube. Now I'm going to start scumbling. Small little circles and marks throughout the section to get it an even tone. Do the same here. Again, a little bit lighter. So maybe not as dense of lines. And then up top, just a little bit. One more thing. A rectangular prism. The same method we went over for a cube works for a rectangular prism. So we're talking about shoe boxes or books on a table. Something that's not a perfect cube can still use the same three sets of 3 parallel lines, right? So 3 sets of 3 parallel lines, right? So let's say we do the same thing we did with the cube, you know, evenly spaced out, right? But let's say evenly length lines and parallel lines on top of that. Let's say I space this out even more. Put one line here, and then the third line a little bit closer to one side. The same thing will apply. So we have three, this is our first set of parallel lines. I have a line coming this way, line coming this way. Let me just fix my line here, and a line coming this way. Similarly, so here's my second, this is my second set of parallel lines. Each one is parallel. Now my third one is going to connect each missing gap here. Okay, so I just wanted to go over that real quick before we move on. I forgot about that. So this is a little add-on to the end of our cube video. And the same shading applies, right? So my light source is here. This will go light. And again, the cast shadow comes off of this line this way. Darkest red meets the object. And fades out that way. Okay, and this can work with any positioning you can think of. So maybe it's like this.